morning. My name is Rachel Seymour Kiesling. I'm with the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce, where I serve as the operations manager as well as the Biloxi Chamber of Commerce director. And our chamber's mission is connect, inform, advocate, and develop. I do want to remind you that we will have time for questions and answers. If you just pop your question into the Q&A right there, we will entertain those at the end. Also, there is a chat version. Even private chats can be downloaded, so we want you to be aware of that they're not completely private. Joining us this morning is Ryan Giles, business coach and certified EOS implementer of Traction Strong. As an entrepreneur and business coach, Ryan has had the opportunity to help dozens of businesses following disasters and crises. In 1998, a rare strain of encephalitis wiped out 84% of his first livestock business. Many of us have lived through Hurricane Katrina, 9/11, and 2008 recession. However, Ryan's learned that living through a crisis doesn't automatically make you a better company. You must be intentional to make sure that you and your team are stronger on the other side. And I feel like Ryan has lived many lives as young as he is, and he's really found his spot as an EOS implementer. I'm going to introduce our CEO, Ms. Adele Lyons, and she's going to say a few words.
Hey, good morning. Hey, Ryan, how are you? We hadn't seen you in a while.
I know. Good morning. I miss you guys.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you today. You've been such a great supporter of the Chamber of Commerce. Ryan served as president of the Coast Chamber Board of Directors in 2018 and did a great job. And it was just his support and his commitment to the Chamber has always been just top notch. I've known Ryan for really a long time and worked with him for a long time. And I agree with Rachel. Definitely think you found your spot here with Traction Strong. And we're just thankful that you're willing to share some of your expertise and time with us and our members this morning. So just thank you, and just great to see your face, hear your voice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele.
All right.
So no further ado, Ryan, kick us off.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you, Rachel. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. As Rachel said, I had the opportunity to work with dozens of clients since this has started. So just thought we'd kind of use today to answer some of the questions that seem to be popping up the most. So if you've got a question that we don't cover, definitely throw it in that Q&A, and we'll save some time at the end to get in there and answer it for you. So the first thing I'd like to start with, we're going to talk about communication today. And one of the things that I've made the mistake of early on, after COVID hit, I'm calling clients and we're talking, and I'm naturally optimistic, and I'm like, hey, how is everything? It's going great. And I talked to business leaders who were scared and they were panicked, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I had to kind of throttle back a bit. And then after a few of those, I'm like, wow, everybody's scared to death. And then I'd kind of walk into the next call, virtually, and I'm really subdued and keeping it mellow, and they're like, oh, it's the best time ever. So I realized that you can't really gauge where somebody is until you ask them. So one of the things that I've started doing, and this is definitely not a bad idea. You should be able to see my screen now, a whiteboard. One of the things I've started doing is starting off with teams and saying, hey, how are you guys doing? I found that there's kind of 4 stages that people are going through in their business. This first stage down here is kind of the comfort zone. And you might have been in the comfort zone 6 months ago, pre-COVID. You may have been in this comfort zone where it's safe, you feel like you're in control, things are going pretty well. And then some chaos, some uncertainty hits, something like COVID, and you hit the fear zone. And you're like, man, what is going on? A lot of uncertainty. You're scared. You may lack some confidence. You're finding excuses. You're reading too much news and watching too much news, and you're definitely in that fear zone. The next zone, though, that we want to get to, we want to keep moving to the right here. The next is this learning zone. And so with this learning zone, we're starting to kind of come out of that fear zone. We're realizing, hey, we can deal with this challenge. We can pick up that new skill set. We can make ourselves a little bit better than we were. I've been preaching a lot, like, don't waste the quarantine. If you have more time, and I know it seems like I'm busier than ever, but I talked to some businesses and they said, Ryan, we have more time. Our people are working from home now, so they're more productive. We have more time in the day, or maybe their client base is scaled back, so they just simply have more hours to work and work on the business. I'm like, okay, well, let's use this to our advantage. Let's pick up some new skill. Well, you'd be in the learning zone if that's where you were. But eventually we want to get over here to the growth zone where we're thinking, what are we really here for? And you're setting these new goals, and you're really using, and I hate to use the P word, but you're really pivoting and coming out of this stronger on the other side. You're becoming a better company. So what I found is I'm having this conversation with leadership teams, but also when you're having one-on-ones with your direct reports, kind of walk through a version of this with them and ask them, hey, how are you doing? I've been shocked that I can sit down a team of 7 or 8 people at a company, and half the team is scared to death zone. 1 or 2 people are in the learning zone, and then 1 or 2 are in the growth zone. We got to get everybody on the same page here. So it's a good tool to use, a good idea to kind of generate a conversation when you're starting to have some of these one-on-ones with your people. So we'll talk more about this a little bit later. So back to our PowerPoint. Another idea I mentioned earlier, that I'm a forever eternal optimist. That's not a bad thing. It reminds me of the story of Admiral Stockdale. So Admiral Stockdale, if you've ever heard of him, Admiral Stockdale was a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War. He was captured and held as a prisoner of war for 8 years, tortured 20 times, and he made it. And he said, I was optimistic. I knew that I would get out of this. I knew that I would come out of this stronger. He said, I knew that I would be a better man, and this would be a defining moment in my life. He said, I wouldn't have traded those 8 years for anything. But as we've talked to him, and as people have researched his time there and really asked him questions, they said, well, a lot of people didn't make it. What's the difference between you who made it out alive and all those who didn't make it? And he said, there was a group that came in, and their hope was lost. They assumed they were dying. They assumed they would never see tomorrow. And guess what? That group didn't. They died the first. They were some of the fastest people to go. And he said, but what surprised me was the other group. He said, those people that were too optimistic, they came in and they said, hey, we're going to be out of here. We'll be back home with our families by Christmas. And he said, when Christmas came and went, we're still in this prison. And he said, they kind of died of a broken heart. He said, so what he realized was that, yes, you need to realize when you're going through, he said, when you're going through hell, you got to realize you're in hell. He said, but you can still be optimistic knowing that we are going to change this. We're going to come out better. We're going to make the most of this. And we'll look back on this and say, hey, we're stronger now than we were before. When I look back on Hurricane Katrina, most of us can relate to that. Man, going through that, in the middle of that, we lost half of our customers overnight. Most of you were probably in similar situations. It was rough. But now I think about how much better of a company we were on the other side, and some of those lessons learned now. Kind of one of those things, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I can kind of see where he comes from. So yes, we need to be optimistic. We need to combine that optimism with a dose of reality. And remember, like I tell people, you as a leader, whatever you do, whatever your people see you doing, whatever they see you saying, however they see you acting, they're going to follow suit. So as you, the leader, goes, so goes the rest of the company. If you're down and pessimistic and don't know what's going to be happening tomorrow and act like that, your team is going to follow suit. So you've got to be an example to them. Which leads me to the next point here. Post-traumatic stress does not equal post-traumatic growth. Back to our Hurricane Katrina story, just because we survived it didn't automatically mean we were going to be a better company. I know many companies that made it through Katrina, and then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, they closed their doors. So just because you make it through something doesn't mean you're going to come out better on the other side. You have to be intentional about that. So today we're going to use our time to talk about how can we be intentional about this? How can we use this as an opportunity to grow, to be a better company, a better leader? How can you use this to improve your leadership skills and working one-on-one with your team? We'll talk about managing that team in this new world. That brings me to another idea, the idea of being anti-fragile. So as a business, that's our ultimate goal, to move to this place of anti-fragility. So I ordered some landscape lights last week, and they came in, and I started working on them Saturday, one of these honey-do list projects. I'm sure none of you are catching up around the house, but that's what I've been doing. And I got this big box, of light bulbs and glass fixtures, and it said fragile really big on the top. And that's how some of our businesses are. If your business has to have its best month ever, if it has to have a certain, high level of profit just to survive, if you have to have all these things, if it's got to be the best economy in 50 years for you to be in business, you're not a very strong business. You're very fragile. We need to make sure that's not the case very long. We need to move from fragile up the scale to robust. Robust means that we're a little bit stronger, that we don't have to have the best economy ever to be a survivor, that we can survive and thrive even when times aren't as good. And then once we master that, we can move into resilience. Resilience means that, yeah, we can take something like a hurricane or like a pandemic, and we can bounce back. It might hit us and hurt us for a while, but we'll come back on the other side. But then the ultimate goal is anti-fragility, being anti-fragile, where not only do these chaoses, and you know, it's funny, I was talking to someone in Florida last week, and they said, Ryan, we got hit with a hurricane 2 years ago. The economy in 2008, 2009 really hammered us. We're going through this pandemic now. They said, it seems like these once in a lifetime natural disasters are happening to us all the time. And so it's kind of the new normal. So you need to be anti-fragile so that when something like this hits us, you can actually be better because of it. Take a candle. If you blow real hard on a candle, if wind hits the candle, it's putting that candle out. But if you take a fire, and the same thing, that wind, you blow real hard on a fire, it actually gets stronger. So we need to think of ourselves like that. We want to be the fire, not the candle. We want to take this and actually be stronger. It reminds me of a saying I heard thinking about this anti-fragile concept. They said, think about an egg. If an egg is broken from the outside, it means almost certain death. But if an egg is broken from the inside, it means life and growth. So thinking about our company, how can we break it down from the inside? How can we look at it and use this COVID crisis to say, okay, what are my weaknesses? What are my vulnerabilities? Because this will show you where you're weak and where you're strong. And how do we take those weaknesses and make them stronger? If we do it ourselves, if we break it down and build it back up, think about going to the gym. You don't go to the gym and lift styrofoam weights. You lift heavy weights. You're exercising with strong weights because you're breaking your body down and you're building it back up. And because you're doing it intentionally, you get stronger. Same thing with our business. Let's use this to say, hey, just pointing out some problems with our people or some problems with our processes, some problems with the way we worked before. We were very inefficient in some ways. So how can we use this to make us a little bit stronger? It reminds me, I talked last week to a business owner. He's in Minnesota, and he has probably the business that I would want the least in a time like this. 6, 8 weeks ago, if you'd have asked me, which business do you want to be in, Ryan? I would have picked the gym. Like owning a gym is probably the last thing on my list. Well, he's a gym owner. He's a gym owner in Minnesota. He's got 5 locations, 50 employees. And he and his leadership team, they got the message on a Friday about 9 weeks ago on Friday that they had to shut down. They saw all their clients in person. They did one-on-one personal training. They saw all their clients in person. They got the message saying you can't meet anybody else in person. And that pretty much shut them down. So what did they do? Well, he has 3 other people on his leadership team, so it's 4 altogether. They immediately met and said, okay, what are we going to do? They're EOS company, so they broke out their EOS plan. That's the system that I recommend. They broke out their plan and they said, okay, what do we do? We got to shift some things. We got to change our plan. So they immediately communicated with their employees, said, listen, we don't know what the plan is yet. We're working on it. We'll let you know more Monday. Don't come into the office Monday. We'll let you know, though, Monday what we find. And he and his leadership team together spent the weekend and all day Monday kind of building this new plan. And I hate to say the P word, but pivot. They were trying to build how do we pivot and take advantage of this? A lot of gyms simply shut down and sent their employees home. My gym, that's what they did. They just simply shut down and crossed their fingers and hoped for the best. And because of that, a lot of these businesses aren't going to make it. A month, 2 months down the road when everybody's back up and running, hopefully, a lot of these businesses won't be there. But how did this come? When Luke is the owner's name of the gym in Minnesota. So what did Luke do that was so different, though? So he and his team got together that Monday, and they said, you know what? We have got to become a virtual training company. We've got to get really good at virtual exercise programs, working one-on-one with our clients and their virtual trainer, and that's got to be our new normal. And we don't need to think, okay, we're a gym and we're going to temporarily be a virtual training company. We need to make every decision for the next few weeks, these critical times, as if we were a full-blown, full-fledged virtual training company. So they immediately got on the phone, started calling their employees, building out this plan, who's doing what, who's going where, what technology do we need, who's learning this, who's installing that. And I'll tell you, Luke is an excellent communicator. We'll talk about that in just a minute. He said, I've got to make sure my employees know what's going on, and I want to hear from them. This is a two-way dialogue I need to be having. So he found out the favorite restaurant for every one of his 50 employees, and for 3 weeks, he would go pick up dinner, and take it to an employee's house, get to meet their family, their kids, their spouse, and find out what's important to them. He would tell them what he knew. They would tell him what they knew. You're talking about building some lifelong employees. Like, he really upped his game and talked to every single employee in their living room, having dinner for the next 3 weeks. So that was one step. But then he said, that's not enough. We need to take it a step further. He and his leadership team said, let's grab our database of all of our clients. They had 1,400 clients. They divided the list by 4. Each of them called over 300 clients personally to first thank them for being a client. And then second, after they thanked them for being a client, they said, what do you need? How can we help you? This is what we're thinking, but what are you thinking? And talking about building some lifelong clients, man, that was amazing. So now fast forward a few weeks, they did 1,400 virtual training sessions last week. 1,400. They were on track to do about $3 million this year. They think with the addition of this new line of business, virtual training, they can add an extra 2. So they've gone from hey, we hope to be a $3 million company to we're going to be a $5 million company this year because of COVID. And instead of looking for customers within 10 miles of one of their 5 locations, now they're bringing in clients in London and in Texas and in California. Their footprint just went worldwide because now they can do it virtually. So that's a good example of turning a fragile company like a gym into an anti-fragile company. So we'll talk about Luke a little bit more later on, but that's our goal here, to be an anti-fragile company. And it's all about moving from fragile to robust to resilient to anti-fragile. That takes us into another idea here, an idea called SCARF. So one of my mentors many years ago, he's a psychologist. He focuses on team health. And so with, let me jump back over to our whiteboard here. And he used to always start off our sessions talking about SCARF. He would talk about SCARF. I said, well, his name was Dino, best name ever, Dr. Dino Signore. So I love Dr. Dino, and he would always talk about SCARF. And I would say, tell me again why SCARF is so important. He said, well, SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And the SCARF model is a model that explains what we humans need to feel happy as part of a team. Whether it's part of a family or part of a team at work, your brain needs these 5 things to feel like it belongs. And so status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. So I tested positive for COVID about 6 or 7 weeks ago, so I had some time sitting in bed as I was on lockdown and quarantine. I had some time to think about it all. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, which of these 5 are really at risk in this COVID environment? And it's really the middle 3. Certainty is a big one. You know, if certainty is not there, fear is. As certainty goes down, which means uncertainty goes up, fear goes up with it. So you're going to have people that are scared. You're going to have people that are stressed beyond the norm if you can't give them certainty. So it's our job as leaders to give them as much certainty as we can. Let's go back to Luke in the gym. The day after he got the note saying we're shutting you down, he didn't have a lot of answers, but that didn't stop him from picking up the phone and calling his employees and talking to his people. It's not about you having all the answers. It's about you being willing to talk. I talked to businesses 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks after this COVID stuff started, and they had sent their employees home and hadn't called them, hadn't emailed them, hadn't told them anything. Their employees were at home scared to death. Do I have a job? What does tomorrow look like? Is the business even going to exist? So you can't hide behind excuses. You've got to be out there talking to people, talking to your employees, talking to your clients, giving them as much certainty as you can. Again, it's okay to say, I don't know, just have the conversation. So we have to make sure we increase this certainty in times like this. The next one that's at risk is autonomy. Right now, we're just like, hey, do it this way. People need to feel like they have some control over their lives or what's going on. So as you work with them, as you work with your direct reports, ask them, what would you do? What do you think? I'm big, we talk about this growth zone here. I'm big about talking to employees and saying, hey, what do you need to be learning right now? Obviously, the company might need certifications or training or skill set, but what do you as an individual think we need? What do you think you should be spending your time? If you have a learning budget, I suggest give people a learning budget of dollars, but also of time. Hey, we're going to give you an hour a day or 2 hours a week, or some amount of time to spend on bettering yourselves, which will better our company. So give them some autonomy there. And then finally, relatedness. Relatedness is, how do we interact with each other? Do we feel like we belong? Do we feel like we're part of a tribe? You know, most people do. They need to belong to a group. And right now, we are not having that chance to get around the water cooler and talk and hang out at lunch. You know, I used to love going to lunch with my team, and we'd talk and catch up, and we use that for all kind of purposes. You're not able to do that right now in many cases. So how can we build that relatedness up? So we'll talk about that more in just a little bit, but you got to give people that chance. So when it comes to SCARF, it's your job to make sure that your employees have this, because that's when they'll be confident and comfortable and happy. And the SCARF model really explains kind of how the frontal part of our brain works with the limbic system in the back of the brain. So if we can make sure our employees have these, they're going to be happy, which means they're going to be better employees, better workforce. And at the end of the day, that means a better company. So keep that SCARF model in mind as we go. Let's see here. So in addition to SCARF, I mentioned the relatedness part. One of the things that I've been talking to people about is meetings. Are we having enough meetings? Are we having too many meetings? And you might say, Ryan, I've been into some pretty bad meetings. I have too. I've been into some pretty rough meetings. I love this coffee mug. I just survived another meeting that should have been an email. But that doesn't mean all meetings are bad. Just because you had a bad meeting doesn't mean all meetings are bad. It means bad meetings are bad. We should be having meetings, but we should be having effective meetings. I was talking to a team on Monday. I had my first in-person meeting. I flew out to Dallas and met with a team, and they were like, Ryan, you know, it just feels like we're meeting a lot, but we're not getting stuff done. And so as we were talking through it, I said, well, tell me what's going on. And again, it was that they were having a bad meeting. It's not that all meetings were bad, just that the meetings they were having were bad. So what I recommended, I said, okay, we need to pull back. We need to go through our agenda, make sure we're doing the right things. And in most cases, I found that teams are benefiting from meeting more often. If you were meeting once a week before, I've seen teams go to every other day, or even some teams doing every day. If you were meeting with your whole company once a quarter, I've seen teams doing it once a month. I've even seen a few teams doing it once a week. So make sure you have the right meeting rhythm. Again, it goes back to that certainty. Over communicate. In times of uncertainty, over communicate. You will always get better results that way. So one of the ways we've been doing that in some teams is kind of this daily huddle where they'll spend a few minutes, you know, in fact, we used to do it in my last company, and we'd start at a weird time in the morning to make it kind of stick in people's brain. From 8:07 to 8:17, we had a daily huddle. And really, we were just asking ourselves two questions. Hey, are we stuck anywhere from yesterday? In other words, was there any problem from yesterday that we didn't get solved? And then, is there anything today that we think might be an issue we need to talk about now? So we're just looking backwards. Hey, anything we need to unstick from yesterday? And is there any problem today that we can foresee that we need to work on? And so it kind of helps everybody get centered. It gives you, again, that little bit of certainty, a little bit of that relatedness. You're meeting as a team. And one way I've seen people even use this, kind of taking it to the next step in this COVID environment, they've started doing these, instead of doing them in the mornings, they're doing them in the afternoons, like 4:45. And they're saying, hey, do it over Zoom or do it over Microsoft Teams, have your camera on. And at the end of the meeting, when we're done at 4:55 or 5 p.m., just leave your camera on. Let's just sit in front of the computer. Let's just hang out. Let's have that social interaction. Let us meet your family. Show us your dog. Let's talk about, you know, the home projects you're working on. Let's just give people a chance to be social, to be part of their tribe again, something that they're probably missing. So think about that. If you think about daily huddles, I've seen people do, you know, virtual happy hours, or Rachel and I were talking earlier, virtual trivia. You can have a lot of fun with it. So make sure you're doing as much as you can to kind of build that relatedness, that SCARF model relatedness into your teams. The next thing, and you guys are probably way beyond this now, but I wanted to at least bring it up. I've got a sample of this. If you don't have a remote worker policy, shoot me an email. I'm happy to send this to you. But the idea is you need a remote worker policy. You probably already have this, so we're not going to spend much time on it today. If you don't, shoot me an email, and we will shoot that out to you. The next one, kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about, in times of uncertainty and chaos, you need to overmanage. And if you think this is overmanaging, you're wrong. There's a difference between overmanaging and micromanaging. So I'm a recovering micromanager, so I totally get this. But this is not what I'm talking about with overmanaging. Overmanaging means whatever you were doing before, just do more of it. If you were talking to your employees once a week, try talking to them 2 or 3 times a week. If you were calling your clients once a month, try calling them every week. If you were talking to your vendors every quarter, call them every month. It's your job to over communicate, over manage, give people a chance to talk to you, you talk to them. So whatever you've been doing, over manage. And one of the things that's really helped me in my early days as a leader, and I teach this to people now, we call it LMA, lead and manage and accountability, or leading and managing and holding people accountable. And in my early days as a leader, I thought, man, it's that accountability part that I'm really weak in. How do I hold people accountable? And I realized I was looking at it kind of wrong. Instead of saying, how do I hold people more accountable? LMA, think about this, L plus M equals A. So if we lead and we manage, we will automatically hold people accountable. So I was focusing on the wrong thing. I was focusing on the accountability part when I should have been focusing on the leading and managing, and that would have led to accountability. And you might say, hey, that makes sense, Ryan, but what does it really mean? How do we make sure we're leading and managing? So one of the tools that I teach our clients is this, what we call our 5-step questionnaire for leadership. So it's 5, if you can answer yes to these 5 questions, you are leading very well. So running through these, are you giving your people clear direction? Do they know what's going on? Do they know what the vision is, where the company's going? Do they know what the plan is? You know, in our EOS world, the system that I teach our clients, we call it our VTO, our Vision Traction Organizer. It's really a little simple 2-page business plan. Do our people know what's going on? That's the first question. The second one, are you giving people the necessary tools, especially in this COVID environment? If they're working remotely, do they have the tools to work remotely? Do they have the software? Do they have the hardware? Do they have the security? That's something that's way overlooked right now, technical security. You know, there's still data breaches going on. In fact, data breaches are up more than ever right now. So make sure when your people are working remotely, they still have security in mind. You can't have your employee working on the same computer that they have their 7-year-old doing their 2nd grade schoolwork on. You're going to have some security breaches on that, almost guaranteed. The last point under providing necessary tools, and this one is the most important, your time and attention. If you used to spend an hour or 2 a day managing your team, it's going to take double that now. You've got to over-manage. You've got to spend more time, not less. When you're at home, don't think I can spend less time managing my team. You need to spend more time managing your team. So keep that in mind. People, you need your time and attention. If you don't like spending time with you, I had this come up once. Had a client in Canada. One of their employees came up after we were going through some exercise, and they said, Ryan, you know, I found out that I just really don't like people. And I kind of laughed, and I said, guess what, buddy? That may mean you don't need to be a leader. You know, how many high school and college graduations have you sat through where the person says, you're all leaders? No, you're not all leaders. And you shouldn't all be leaders. Everybody's not cut out to be a leader. And if you don't like interacting with people, if you don't like giving them your time and attention, if you don't get more excited helping your team grow and develop than you do about getting yourself to the next level, then you may not be cut out to be a leader. So take that for what it's worth. The number 3 here, are you letting go of the vine? Are you delegating? Are you giving your people a chance to step up? The only way for you to advance to the next level, and an easier way for you to advance to the next level, is to help the company replace you. You don't be afraid. When I talk to companies and they have employees who they kind of like build in job security by not teaching anybody what they know, that kind of looks at it backwards. We should be willing to help people learn what we know and help them really take over our role so that we can grow into something else. So you've got to learn how to delegate and elevate. If you've got trouble with that, let me know. I've got some resources that can help there, but you got to be willing to let go of the vine and help your team step up. That comes back to that autonomy we were talking about with SCARF, the autonomy side. Number 4 here, are we acting with a greater good in mind? Are you putting the company's needs first? Are you walking the walk instead of just walking the talk? I was with a team a while back, and one of the owners said, man, I can't get my team to put their time in. They are a company that charges for their time. So they bill hourly, and they have this software that they put all their time in. At the end of the month, it sends their customers a bill. And so he said, man, I can't get my people to put their time in. Like the month will go by and I'm still trying to get them to put time in from 3 weeks ago. So I know we're missing things. And we were talking about it and discussing it. And how do we solve this? And finally, somebody said, his name was Robert. They said, Robert, is your time in? He kind of started turning a little bit red. He's like, well, I'm probably a few weeks behind. And we realized that's the problem. They're watching him. He's not putting his time in, so they're not putting their time in. So you've got to do what you expect your people to do. It's not do what I say, it's do what I do. And that's what it is in the real world. And the last one here, are we taking clarity breaks? Instead of turning that Netflix on, instead of watching TV, are you thinking? You know, I love the Henry Ford quote. He says, thinking is one of the hardest things, which is why so few people do it. You're not accidentally going to succeed. You're not accidentally going to come out stronger on the other side of COVID-19. You have to be intentional about it. That means you need time to think. So you got to get out. The good news is now you might have a little bit more time. You might be able to go sit out in the front yard or hop on the back porch, or, you know, get some quiet time away from all the hassle of the office or the house or wherever you're spending your work hours, and think about it. How do we take this to the next level? How do we improve? How do we grow the business? So think about that. So that's the leadership side. If you can say yes to these 5 questions, then you are a good leader. The next page is management. Can you answer these 5 questions? Yes. If you can answer these 5 questions, yes, then you are a great manager. And if you really are brave, don't fill this out by yourself. Print 2 blank copies and give your direct reports one and ask them to fill it out with you and see what they say, because the only way to really know the answers to these is ask your direct reports, well, hey, how would you answer these? So when you're working with your direct reports, are you keeping expectations clear? In other words, do they know what's expected of them? Do you know what's expected of you? This is not a one-way conversation. This is a dialogue here, which leads us into the next step. Are we communicating well? You and them. Do you know what's on their mind? Do they know what's on your mind? One of the things we talk about is kind of the 2 emotions. If I was to call, you know, Sally and say, Sally, we love you. You're doing a great job. We want to give you a raise. We want to promote you into this new role. It comes with more money and more responsibility. Her reaction initially is probably going to be, yes, I'm excited. I'm happy. Don't stop there, though. Ask her what. That's your first emotion. What's your second emotion? How else does that make you feel? And I had this happen once where the person I was talking to said, you know, I am excited. I'm really excited. I want this job. I've been waiting for this opportunity. They said, but I'm also a little bit scared. I don't feel like I've really had enough time to train as much as I would like, and I need some more experience. I'm like, great. So how can we help with that? So don't just stop at the first emotion. Ask, how else does that make you feel, to uncover any issues that you need to help resolve. Another one here, and I used to be very guilty of this, when I had an employee come in for our one-on-ones, it would basically be me preaching to them for 20 minutes. And I realized that's not a dialogue. That's not coaching. We have to become better coaches. And so monitor how many questions you're asking versus how many statements you're making. Grab a little sticky notepad. And I did this for a while. I kept it on my desk. And when somebody would come in, I would ask, okay, how many questions did I ask? How many statements did I make? And as I'm having the conversation, I'm making little lines on the paper. And I realized I was doing a whole lot of preaching and not much question asking. And if you're going to develop your people and really have them grow, you've got to think like a coach and say, well, hey, why did you do it that way? How would you do it next time? How long do you think this will take? What would you do in that situation? You're coaching them to make better decisions so that they can act without you. They can basically work without having you micromanage them. So keep that in mind. Number 3 here, do we have the right meeting pulse? Do you feel like you're meeting with your people enough? Are you interacting? Do they feel like they know what's going on? Do you know what's going on? Again, in times of uncertainty like this, you probably need to meet more often than you think. Definitely more often than you were meeting 6 months ago. Number 4 here, are we having quarterly conversations? These are like performance reviews. So when I'm meeting with employees and I'm like, okay, do you guys have performance reviews? Yes, we have once a year performance reviews. They're in December every year. I said, great. I said, well, when you're meeting with your people in December, are you remembering what they were doing in July? They said, no, we barely remember in November, much less July, definitely not March or February. So annual performance reviews, while they're good and you probably need them, that's not all you need. You should be checking in with your people much more often than that. They need a one-on-one much more frequently than once a year. But make sure you're having those. We normally say quarterly. Again, in times like this of uncertainty, it might need to be even more often, but have that one-on-one conversation. And then lastly here on this page, are we rewarding and recognizing? When your people do a good job, you need to let them know, and not just let them know, let everybody know. You have to reward publicly, criticize privately. You got to make sure that you're coaching your people. And remember that first you're their boss, not their buddy. I remember in my previous company, we were growing and we were hiring some great salespeople. And I came in one Saturday morning and I found out that a bunch of our salespeople had a big party at some of our ops people's houses, and they had a big barbecue, and it was a big deal on Saturday night, and they were all talking about it. And the first reaction, I kind of felt like I was crushed because I didn't get invited. But then I realized I'm their boss first, not their buddy. My dad was a preacher for many years, and he always said familiarity breeds contempt. So we got to remember, we should love the people we're working with because you're spending so much time with them. They should be like family, but you are their boss first. So there's that balance. So keep that in mind. And then finally, kind of the 3-strike rule. The good news is the vast majority of people in the world are coachable, but some people aren't. And you don't need those people on your team. So if they're not the kind of teammate you need, you may not need them very much longer. So we'll talk about that some more in just a minute. But that's kind of the leadership and management. So if you can answer yes to these 5 leadership questions and yes to these 5 management questions, you will automatically be holding your people accountable, and you will be a great leader and a great manager. So keep that in mind. The next point I want to talk about, I read this article about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't believe it was true at first, but I've started talking to a lot of people about it, and it is. I'm shocked at how accurate this is. The report said that in the previous month, the average person in America has averaged 8.1 hours of screen time per day that's not work related. In other words, they're spending 8.1 hours a day on YouTube, on Netflix, watching TV, watching movies. That is ridiculous. Can you even imagine the lost opportunity here? I'm not saying you can't have fun, but 8 hours a day, really? Hopefully nobody on here is watching 8 hours. But if you're watching 2 hours, that means somebody else is watching like 14. So keep that in mind. Don't watch so much stuff. Turn the screens off, and especially if you're watching the news. These days, it's not positive. So be careful with that. You're not going to be optimistic if you spend a lot of time on news websites or news channels. With that in mind, though, listen, I know people are spending more time at home. They're not commuting. They have more time than ever, and they are watching TV. How can we use that to our advantage? I was talking to a team recently, and they said, Ryan, we knew our guys were going to be watching TV a lot. So we said, how do we take advantage of that? So they started having a movie of the week, and they're trying to find movies that are optimistic, that have a leadership lesson, movies like Braveheart or Pursuit of Happiness or Apollo 13, movies that talk about overcoming adversity, talk about leading a group, that talk about, striving for that happiness in your life. And then they'll talk about it. So at their meetings, at their team meetings every week, they assign a movie. Okay, guys, this week we're going to watch Apollo 13. And then next week when they get together for their meeting, they discuss it. They spend a few minutes kind of talking about it. So if you are going to watch TV, and we probably all are, then make sure we're doing it in as productive a way as possible. So movie of the week, good idea there. The next idea, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier a little bit, is in these times, upgrade your team. I have so many clients, and 3, 4, 5 months ago, their biggest issue was, Ryan, we're growing, but we can't find enough good people. Like, we just can't find good talent. Last week, there were over 30 million unemployment claims. That means there's a lot of great talent that's out there that needs a job. So ask yourself, if I need some great people, is now the time to hire them? You might just be able to add some phenomenal people that you didn't even know would be available. Second, ask yourself, do I have some people that maybe they're not coachable, maybe they're not A players, that maybe I don't need on my team? Listen, I hate to say it, but some people don't need to work for you. And now's the time to look at possibly upgrading those people. Or you might say, Ryan, we have the right people. We love them, but can we upgrade their skill set? I was talking to a team recently, and they're an IT company down in Florida. And luckily, we planned a year ago, they were going to start moving all their clients to the cloud. And they're coming out of this smelling like roses. They look like geniuses now because they've moved all their clients to the cloud. And so that people can work so easily. They look great. We were talking about, though, we're like, okay, well, that's working great. They've grown 30% in the last 8 weeks. They've added more clients than they imagined. And now I said, well, great. Are all your people certified to work on cloud systems? And they said, we only got half our people certified. I said, well, we got to get the other half certified. So now the other half of their team is going through these certifications to upgrade their skill set. So ask yourself, how do we need to upgrade our team to be stronger on the other side? Another idea for stronger on the other side, I noticed a lot of employees, a lot of customers were having problems with processes. Processes are how you give consistent results to your clients. They make work more fun, more profitable, much more scalable. Your employees like it because it gives them a structured way to do things, especially new employees. It makes training and onboarding new employees so much better. There's only one best way to do each thing, and that should be the documented process. I was talking to a team the other day. They had 40 employees. And I said, do you have a process for that? And they said, no. I kind of laughed. I said, I bet you have 40 processes for that. I said, I bet each person is doing it their own way. In fact, in many cases, you've got more than 40 processes because some people don't even do it the same way twice. And they said, you know, you're right. We probably have 60 different ways to do that one thing. So I said, we got to find the best way and document it, and that's our process for it. And these don't have to be 100 pages long each. In fact, I've found in most cases, a one-pager works better than anything else. So I wrote this ebook. It's totally free. So if you say, hey, that makes sense, my team can work on their processes, we can polish these, whether we're starting from scratch or whether we have processes, we just need to get followed. Because I found that some people go through the effort of building out great processes and then their team doesn't follow them. So I've got 17 tips in here for how to get your processes followed, a couple of tips for how to write them. I've got 13 real world examples what processes should look like, your HR process, your customer service process, your accounting processes, your sales processes. We've got 13 examples here. So this is free. At the end of this, if you want a copy, shoot me an email and I'm happy to shoot you the PDF version of this. And then another idea, how do we make sure we're stronger on the other side? And this might not be the time to talk about this, but this needs to be something, if you've got a long-term issues list, if you and your leadership team have a place like a parking lot that you write issues that you want to talk about a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road, add this to it. You know, one of my business mentors told me, and it was funny, he was just telling me this about 3 months ago, right before this COVID issue hit. He said, Ryan, you know, there's about a 10-year cycle in business. And he said, we've gone back and looked at the last 70, 80 years, and it's held true. He said, in a 10-year cycle, a business will have 6 okay years, 2 really good years, and 2 really bad years. And they said, so much of the time, we base our whole business model on those 2 great years, where we have to have a great year to be profitable. We have to have a great year to have all these other good things happen. He said, and that's not the case. We need to build our business so that we're strong, even on those okay years. When we have great years, we can be even better. And then when we have those 2 great years out of 10, we can use that to kind of build up this rainy day fund. I was talking to a client the other day, actually yesterday, and I'm like, okay, they're in New York. I'm like, how are you doing on cash? They have a lot of customers who are totally shut down right now. And they said, Ryan, we have about a 6-month, really closer to 8-month cash reserve. So it kind of sucks that we're really having to dive into some of our cash reserves, but we literally built it as a rainy day fund. That's what it's there for. And so they sleep a lot better at night knowing that they have that backup plan. So your business should have a rainy day fund. How much you put in, it's up to you. I think on the low end, you need at least 3 months. On the high end, it depends on your business. You need more than that, but 3 to 6 seems to be a good number. But think about that, business cycles and rainy day funds. The next, I'm shocked at this, companies do not know their numbers. I was talking to a company last week, they're $237 million, and they're like, yeah, we're trying to get numbers in for 3 months ago. I'm like, February numbers aren't going to help you a lot right now. Like, you can't look at February and tell, oh, the business is running great. Well, of course it was running great in February. How's it running great today in May? So you've got to know your numbers, and you've got to, if you are a business leader and you don't like the numbers, you got to figure out a way to like it. Like you don't have to be a CFO. You don't have to pour over your books 8 hours a day, but you have to show enough interest that you know what's going on. I've seen people get in a whole world of hurt because they simply didn't pay attention to the numbers. So you've got to watch the numbers now closer than ever. You should be looking every single week, maybe even every single day. You should be looking at kind of a cash on hand and how many days of runtime that gets you. If it takes your business 10 grand a day to run, for all your bills and employees and payroll and expenses, if it takes 10 grand a day and you got 100 grand, you got 10 days of cash. If you got 200 grand, you got 20 days of cash. So every single day you should be looking at it and saying, how much cash do we have? How much run time does that give us? That's a great metric to look at. And again, every day is not a bad frequency to look at that. And then kind of lastly, as we wrap up here, you know, as a parting thought, are you playing to win or are you just playing not to lose? I've got a customer I was talking to they're kind of new, they're over in Louisiana, and they're a tech company. And this all happened, and their first response was, we send all our employees to the house, and they didn't want to talk to me for the first few weeks. And finally, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to, like, we need to talk. Because while the same time that they're doing no business and their employees were literally sitting at home drawing a paycheck, watching Netflix for 8.1 hours a day. I had another client, just across the state line that's growing 30%, that all their employees are working, that they're trying to hire new employees. And I'm like, this is literally the tale of two companies here. Are we playing to win, or are we just simply playing not to lose? We've got to be thinking ahead. How do we not just survive this, but how do we come out like our gym there, where we actually come out as a better company with more opportunity than we had before? So think about that. And if you need help with any of this, reach out to me, reach out to the chamber. We're here to help. This is what we're here for. And with that, Rachel, we're open for questions and answers if anyone has any.
Awesome. Folks, I'll direct you to the Q&A box on your screen to enter those questions. Ryan, your optimism, I'm an optimist also, but you inspire me. How do you, certainly, going through having COVID and maintaining a great attitude, what strategies do you use to always keep that positive outlook and positive attitude, especially when you're communicating that to your clients who are somewhat, in some ways, kind of your employees right now, is the way you operate?
My first response to that would be probably the most unbusiness related response you'll get from me today, but honestly, I just pray a lot. That is the legitimate first primary reason. My second reaction would probably be, there's an old Warren Buffett quote that says, market share is gained in times of crisis. And it reminds me that this is when, you look back on history, this is when giant companies become better. This is when small companies become great. I think there's opportunity for every single business if they look for it. And I've talked to some businesses that I thought were in the worst positions possible, and they have pivoted and they have changed, and I literally talked to this guy in New York. We were chatting about 3 weeks ago, and he was a marketing company, and he had some resources, and he had some customers and some contacts, and he's a connector. He works, and he literally within a few days figured out how to connect some people, and they spun up a new business making hand sanitizer. I talked to him 3 weeks ago, but this was about 8 weeks ago when this happened. Their first week, they did $10 million of revenue in their first week. And I'm like, so most of the people on this call are entrepreneurs at heart. You are built for this. This is what you're made for. You shine. You should shine in times like this. So I'm excited. I kind of wish, I was talking to somebody in IT the other day. I'm like, man, I kind of wish I had an IT company again, because there's so much opportunity out there in IT right now. So this is a good time to be alive. Obviously, people are hurting. We need to take that into account. But let's make ourselves stronger so we can help them. We can't help them if we're in the same ditch they're in.
Fantastic. We do have a request for you to list your email address. Actually, we will provide that on the back end. Oh, Ryan just put it on the screen. There we go. So, but we will also email that out in our follow-up to all the attendees. So you have Ryan's contact information. The next question we have is, do you have any book recommendations?
Yes. So when it comes to rainy day fund and just finances in general, there's a book called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. So I really strongly recommend that. That book changed my business life. It also changed my personal life when it comes to how to make sure your business is profitable no matter what. So Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. If you want to talk about how do I lead and manage, there's a phenomenal book. In fact, one of the books that we teach called How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman, Gino Wickman, How to Be a Great Boss. That's a really good one. Those are probably two of my favorite related to our conversation today.
Awesome. Managers have a lot on their plates trying to keep connected to employees while working at home and trying to pivot. Can you talk a little bit about time management?
Yes. So for those people that know me, I am a journaler. I don't know if you can see this, but I know with my green screen, it makes it a little difficult, but I have a journal, and I think it's about prioritization. It's funny, I did a blog a while back. The word priority was first used in the 1400s, and it was impossible. It's Latin. It was impossible to be plural. There was no such thing as priorities. It was not possible. The word priority means most important thing, and they said, well, it can't be plural. You can only have one most important thing. Of course, in the 1800s, us Americans figured out we need to make this thing plural. And I met with a team a while back, and they said, we have 27 priorities this quarter. I'm like, oh, no, you don't. You may think you do, but you really don't. And so I think so what I do, I have my 1 year plan, and I have it in the back of my journal. It's simply a 1-pager. And every couple of weeks, I'm breaking it out, looking at what's my 1 year plan. But the back of that 1 year plan has my 90-day plan. And it's simple. It's literally like a third of a page. And on that 90-day plan, I look at it every Sunday night at 9 p.m. On my calendar, every Sunday night at 9 p.m., it goes off and says, plan the week. And so I look at my plan for the next 90 days and I say, okay, am I moving towards these 90-day goals? Is my 90-day goal to make sure my team is productive, to make sure they're working well remotely, to make sure we're hitting profit numbers? What's my 90-day goals? And I have a couple of goals, and I have a date that's due at the end of the quarter. And so every Sunday night, I go through and I plan my week. What do I need to do Monday? What do I need to do Tuesday? What do I need to do Wednesday? And I don't pick more than 3 things. Like, you got to keep it to a minimum here, because you're going to have fires that come up. You're going to have unexpected stuff that happens every day. But every night before I go to bed, I'm like, I got to get these top 3 done. I may have 10 others, like a wish list, but I've only got 3 critical to-dos. So am I doing those 3 critical to-dos every day? So if you wait till the morning of, if I wait to 8:05 to plan my day, it's too late. I'm already in the fire. I'm pretty much shot for the day if I wait till the day starts. So you got to do this the day before. And in many cases, I found that working remotely actually helps me be a little bit more efficient. I don't have quite as many distractions. Or at least if I do, they're distractions I can control. Like, I can walk away from my computer. I can put my phone on silent. So it's easier when I'm in the office, people knock on the door. You have a little bit less control over that. So I found that it's a little bit easier. Another interesting point here is that you've probably started some good habits in this COVID environment. You're probably spending more time with your family, maybe eating dinner as a family more often. You might be exercising more. I am definitely spending more time thinking about my long-term plans. That's a great thing. So my challenge will be, how do I keep those habits going when life gets back to more normal? You've also probably started some bad habits during COVID. Maybe you're not working out. I know I've found out I was eating probably way too much, or sleeping a little bit too late, or going to bed too late. So ask yourself, what habits do I need to stop as this is continuing? So that was a very short answer, but I love delegation and time management are 2 of my favorite topics. So whoever asked that question, if you'd like to talk more about it, give me a call or shoot me an email. I love talking about time management.
And you're so good at it. And honestly, I'm always impressed with your life work balance, even being someone that travels and out of the area, but having a family and maintaining those relationships you always find so important. Do you have any podcasts that you recommend?
I have a few that I like. I don't know that I have any that I love that I would recommend related to this topic. But if there was one, Dan Sullivan, he's got a podcast on growing and scaling and basically business development. He owns a company called Strategic Coach, and so his podcast, the Dan Sullivan podcast, is probably the one I would recommend the most.
Great. How do you think about long-term plans when everything's uncertain? It seems everything is still a what if.
Yeah. So I believe you have to have them. I think it was Dwight Eisenhower that said in World War II, no, it was General Patton in World War II that said planning is useless. I'm sorry. He said a plan is useless, but planning is everything, which brings me to another great orator, Mike Tyson, said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you need a plan, but know that your plan is probably going to change. There's going to be things like this that come up, but it's not the fact that you have a plan that's important. It's the fact that you had a planning process. Because as soon as this happens, we'll go back to the gym example. As soon as this happened, they immediately grabbed their plan and said, okay, what stays the same? What needs to change? So it gives you a good foundation. Like, the whole world's not changing in your plan. Much of it might be, but is it 10% or is it 90%? So you gotta have a base to start with. So what I have been talking to clients about is we still look at the long-term plan just to make sure it's close. We're not trying to get it to the dollar or the exact, but just close. But then we normally set these 90-day goals. We call them rocks. Stephen Covey kind of coined that term, these 90-day goals we call rocks. What we found, though, is that a lot of companies say, I can't look out 90 days. And so I'd say, well, how far out can you look? I can look out maybe a month. I said, great, what's our 1 month goals? And so I'd normally go in person and meet with clients for 8 hours every 90 days. Well, now I'm doing a 3-hour Zoom call where we're just saying, what do we got to do this time? Getting really clear on walking out of there with a solid 4-week plan that they can go to half the company in New York. They be able to open yet. We have to watch on those. We control. Like we know we know they needed to get out of their office lease because they love working remotely so much that we had a goal around moving their office this person. 30-day rocks 30 days from now to check up on those and then set a brand new set of 30-day goals. So I think it's important to have a plan, to go through a planning process, but realize that frequency.
Great. Last question we have is, where can we find your Don't Waste the Quarantine paper?
So if you go to, you can email www.don'twastethequarantine.
So I think we might be having some connection issues with Ryan on his end. Ryan, do you mind repeating that, or can we get that link to send out to folks?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I said you can email me, or you can go to www.don'twastethequarantine.com.
Crystal clear. Perfect. All right. Well, that concludes our program today. We want to thank everyone for joining us. We thank Ryan for presenting. He is a very valued chamber member as well as advocate and volunteer for the organization. We really appreciate your service. And everybody have a great chamber day. We do have a couple of events coming up. Today we have our chamber after 4, and it's going to be appy hour. So we're going to discuss some apps that may be productivity based, maybe entertainment based, but just kind of what people are using and really how those are helping you either stay engaged, stay productive, or just stay entertained. We also have tomorrow our CYP Grow with Amber Olson. Amber's another great board member and volunteer of Next Staff and United MSD Foundation. And she's really going to talk about maximizing that professional presentation. You know, a lot of people are in the market for new jobs. A lot of people are, you know, things like this in the world make people pivot, you know, just to kind of piggyback on what Ryan's saying, and try to figure out what your next plan is, what your next move is, and how you can maximize those interviews and your resume and build upon that. So join us tomorrow, and that'll also be on a Zoom presentation. We want to thank everybody for attending, and have a great chamber day.